Welcome to Midnight Rain Tales. The world sleeps, and the rain begins to whisper. In this quiet hour, stories drift through the night air, soft, chilling, unforgettable. Here, under the midnight sky, we share the tales the rain refuses to forget. Stay close and listen. When the silhouette first troubled the periphery of my vision, I dismissed it, a phantom born of sleeplessness. Night shifts carving Earth 50 miles from anything resembling civilization breed such specters, but the subsequent strangeness defies easy categorization. Not the footprints, not the vanished tools, none of it. 15 years I've haunted construction sites after sundown, mostly urban sprawls where the worst threats were petty thieves after copper veins or the dispossessed seeking transient refuge. But the Blackwater Bend Dam assignment felt different from its inception, nestled deep in mountain folds where cell signals feared to tread. Only the emergency radio tethered me to the world beyond. The compensation? Triple the usual rate, a gilded lure that should have screamed caution. The previous guardian of the night, I learned, had vanished from the payroll after a scant 2 weeks. No notice given. Personal troubles, Kramer, the site supervisor, had mumbled. I didn't probe. Coin is coin. The initial week unfolded with benign predictability. Arrive at dusk, exchange nods with the departing day shift, commence the rounds. The site sprawled, a vast wound in the valley. The skeletal dam, prefabricated offices, yards brimming with dormant machinery, stockpiles of raw materials scattered across 20 acres. Portable light towers bled stark, artificial day onto isolated patches, carving islands of harsh illumination from an ocean of primordial dark. Beyond lay wilderness untamed. My ritual was simple. Patrol the perimeter every 2 hours, inspect the equipment corrals, scrutinize the silent eyes of the security monitors in the main office, ensure the slumbering metal beasts hadn't been left breathing fire, mundane vigilance. That fragile peace shattered on the 8th night. During the desolate 2 a.m. circuit, I saw it. A form standing utterly motionless at the sharp edge where Tower 3's light surrendered to shadow near the eastern equipment yard. Tall, perhaps 6.5 feet. Too distant for discerning features, merely a dense shape against the deeper black. My flashlight leaped to my hand. "Hey, you're trespassing!" No response. The figure remained inert, a study in stillness. I advanced, my boots grinding protest from the gravel. "Armed security, vacate the premises immediately." A necessary fiction. Company policy forbade firearms, but one the darkness didn't need to dissect. 20 yards distant now, still that unnerving lack of reaction. A prickle crawled my nape. Something felt profoundly wrong about its posture, too rigid like statuary. Last warning, authorities are being notified. 15 yards, close enough now for the tower's glare to etch its form more clearly. Dark work clothes, heavy boots, the incongruous gleam of a hard hat. 10 yards. My pulse hammered against my ribs. The figure's architecture was subtly wrong. Arms dangling too low, the neck set at an unnatural slant. 5 yards. I lifted the torch, aiming its interrogating beam at where a face should be. There was only absence. I froze, breath caught. The light pierced clean through the space its head had occupied mere moments before, illuminating nothing but the deeper gloom beyond the tower's reach. A gasp tore from my throat. I pivoted, torch beams scything through the night. Nothing. Not a whisper of retreating steps, no flicker of movement in the dense shadows. Only the thrumming heartbeat of the generators powering the vacant light. My hands trembled as I keyed the radio. "Control, this is Silas. Anyone else scheduled on site tonight?" A crackle, then the dispatcher's disembodied calm. "Negative, Silas, just you holding the fort. Everything copacetic." I hesitated, the lie forming uneasily. "Yeah, thought I glimpsed something. Likely fatigue." The rest of the shift was a taut affair, every shadow scrutinized, every silence pregnant. By dawn, I'd almost woven a tapestry of self-deception, tricks of light, exhaustion's cruel theater. Then, entering the main office to sign out, I saw them. The mud prints. Large, deeply impressed, tracking from the direction of the eastern yard straight to the office door. The mud glistened, impossibly wet. It hadn't rained for over a week. I followed their trail inside. They led directly to the tools storage room. The door remained locked, exactly as I'd secured it hours earlier. But unlocking it, the wrongness hit me like a physical blow. The room, previously a model of mandated order, was disturbed. Gaps yawned on the pegboard walls where tools had hung. A chainsaw, 2 heavy demolition hammers, a concrete saw. Significant weight, far too much for a single intruder to spirit away silently. I reviewed the security feed. 8 cameras, 8 perspectives, all showing the same desolate panorama all night. No figures, no intrusions, only the inexplicable prints and the missing inventory. Reporting it to Kramer upon his arrival yielded little surprise. "Happened last month," he stated, his gaze skittering away. "Month before, too, always coincides with the new moon. Same specific tools disappear. They turn up eventually, few days later, caked in mud and something else. Smells like decay." Why wasn't I informed of this when I was hired? A shrug, laden with weary resignation. Would it have changed your mind? The urge to quit then, and there was almost overwhelming. Prudence screamed retreat, but the lure of the pay, coupled with a burgeoning morbid curiosity, held me fast. I needed to understand the apparition I'd witnessed. Subsequent nights descended into an unnerving quietude. The wilderness held its breath. No crickets chirped, no owls called. Only the sighing wind and the drone of the generators filled the void. Other anomalies surfaced. The light towers would sometimes flicker in unison, despite their independent circuits. Tools migrated subtly from their designated spots, even within the locked storage, defying my certainty of being the sole presence. Then came the scratching. I first registered it in the main office, amidst the silent flicker of the monitor screens. A slow, grating insistence from within the walls, as if something sharp, something clawed, sought entry. Placing a hand against the drywall, I felt the faint vibration. But the moment my flashlight beam sought the source, silence fell. This auditory haunting pursued me nightly, manifesting in different locations, within the echoing confines of the portable latrines, beneath the hulking equipment trailers, behind the cold steel of storage containers. always ceasing just as I neared discovery. I began documenting obsessively, photographs at shift start, tool placements, equipment positions, the calligraphy of tire tracks in the dust, compared against shift end. Minute alterations accumulated, a spanner displaced by inches, a hard hat rotated on its hook, surveyor stakes inexplicably driven deeper. The day crews remained oblivious. Whatever transpired, it belonged solely to the night. A week after the encounter with the faceless figure, the first message appeared, gouged into the office door's paint with crude, angry strokes. Leave. Kramer painted over it before the day shift arrived, offering no comment, asking no questions, just another inconvenient truth swept under the rug. 2 nights later, another missive, carved this time into the wooden haft of a shovel. We were here first. Driven, I delved into the site's lineage. The dam project, long stalled by environmental disputes, occupied land previously designated wilderness. But further back, archives whispered of an old mining concern from the 1880s. Records were fragmented, hinting at disaster, a catastrophic cave-in. 27 souls entombed, their bodies never reclaimed. The mine entrance dynamited shut, its precise location lost to time, yet overlaying antique survey maps with the dam's modern blueprints sent a chill cascade down my spine. The Eastern Equipment Yard, the very spot where the figure manifested, sat squarely atop the presumed coordinates of that buried mine shaft. I confronted Kramer with this discovery. He became agitated, refusing discussion, deflecting any historical concerns toward distant corporate entities. His hands, I noted, were unsteady. That night, the temperature plummeted, dropping 30 degrees in minutes like a stone cast into a well. The generators began to cough and sputter. One by one, the light towers choked and died, plunging vast swaths of the site into profound darkness. I was mid-round when the blackout hit. Emergency backups failed to engage. My flashlight beam felt feeble, swallowed by the oppressive black. Then, the sound. Bootfalls on gravel just behind me, measured, heavy, deliberate. I whirled, flashlight stabbing the dark. Vacancy, yet the steps persisted, describing a slow circle around my position, drawing inexorably nearer. My beam snagged on motion, not one but several shapes detaching themselves from the surrounding ink. 6, 7, perhaps 8, clad in the rough garb of miners from a bygone era, each unnaturally tall, limbs stretched impossibly long. Hard hats obscured their features, tilted down like penitents. They formed a silent ring, hovering just beyond the frail circumference of my light, heads cocked at angles that spoke of broken necks. My radio crackled, spitting static that coalesced into sound. Not one voice, but many, layered and resonant, speaking as one. This ground remembers. These tools are ours. The deep below claims its own. The static surged, a tidal wave of noise swallowing all else. My flashlight sputtered, gave a final apologetic flicker, and died. In the sudden, suffocating blackness, I heard them move. The collective crunch of boots on stone closing in. I ran. A blind, desperate flight through unseen obstacles, stumbling over construction debris. Behind me, the footsteps matched my pace. A relentless, unhurried pursuit. Never gaining, never receding. Reaching the office, I slammed the door, fumbled the lock, snatched the emergency torch from the desk. Its beams sprang to life, illuminating the windows. They stood outside each pane, utterly still, silent watchers. Their hard hats were tilted back now, revealing faces that were horrifyingly simple. Black pits, empty sockets gaping above rows of sharp, needle-like teeth. The scratching resumed, not from the walls this time, but erupting from beneath the floorboards. Louder, frenetic. The entire structure began to vibrate. Floorboards groaned, splintered. Mud, thick, black, viscous, began to well up through the widening cracks, releasing an ancient stench of decay and rusted metal. I kicked out a window furthest from the silent, watching figures and plunged back into the night. Ran until my lungs burned, ran until I reached my truck. Didn't ease off the accelerator until 10 miles of asphalt lay between me and that damned place. From the cracked receiver of a gas station payphone, I tendered my resignation to Kramer. "They all do," he sighed down the line, his voice heavy with inevitability. "Final checks in the mail." 3 months have passed. The missing tools materialized a week after my departure, abandoned in the parking lot of the nearest town's police station, coated in mud, rust, and residues best left unidentified. The Blackwater Bend Dam project continues, relentlessly. New night guards are hired, cycle through, and flee. The turnover is astronomical, yet a steady stream of desperation fills the vacancies. Sometimes the thought of returning flickers, not for the money, but for the gnawing need to comprehend what they are, what drives them, why I was permitted to leave when those long-ago miners were not. Then the image resurfaces, those empty sockets, those needle teeth, and the second message echoes. We were here first. Perhaps in some unfathomable way they remain, diligently working their subterranean claim, utilizing their purloined tools, walking their endless rounds in the deep dark. Some mysteries are best left undisturbed. Last week, a letter arrived. No return address. Inside a single sheet. Words scratched upon it in a familiar, jagged hand. "We await you, Night Watcher. Return to the deep. Your place is kept." I consigned the letter to flames, relocated. Yet sometimes late at night, a faint scratching seems to emanate from my own walls, and occasionally, peering out my window, I glimpse fresh boot prints in mud that wasn't there before the rain. They are patient, and a chilling certainty settles within me. Eventually, I will go back. The deep dark infects the mind, burrows beneath the skin. It never truly relinquishes its hold. For now, though, I embrace the daylight, the city's clamor, the illusion of safety beneath the sun. I strive not to contemplate who or what walks the night watch at Blackwater Bend, or question the project's interminable delays, or tally the guards who've come and gone before the dam is finally, if ever, complete. Some places reject intrusion, some earth refuses to be tamed, and some shifts belong not to the living. That's the litany I recite to court sleep. It rarely works. The memory clings, sharp as shattered glass. That first night the sounds began overhead. I'd just settled into this edifice of aging brick, its timber-framed windows groaning under the wind's persuasion. Sleep was pulling at me, a slow tide, when a grating shudder ripped through the quiet, something ponderous being dragged across the floorboards directly above. I bolted upright in bed, the sound raw, immediate. A frantic pulse hammered against my ribs. I tried to dismiss it, the usual nocturnal creaks and groans of old architecture, but this intrusion refused to fade. Then came the footfalls, deliberate and weighty, tracing a path from one wall of the upper flat to the other, heavy enough to send tremors through my own ceiling, heavy enough that I felt the faint vibration in the frame of my bed. A knot tightened low in my belly. Just a new tenant, I reasoned, wrestling furniture into place, a midnight rearrangement. Yet a deeper instinct recoiled. The rhythm felt too measured, too insistent, like a path worn smooth by repetition. My own space is modest, tucked away on the third floor of this 4-story structure. A single bedroom, a living area stretched thin, those same archaic wooden windows prone to slamming shut without a wedge to hold them fast. The building's notoriety rests on its substantial, almost fortress-like construction. Neighbors swore the walls swallowed sound whole, rendering televisions and conversations blessedly mute, and yet somehow every scrape, every thud, every footstep from the apartment crowning mine pierced the supposed silence. That initial disturbance was merely an annoyance, easily shelved, but it returned, night after night, punctual as a morbid clock striking 11. Sometimes the distinct screech of furniture legs tormented the floor above. Other times a heavy impact followed by a cascade of dull, echoing thumps that resonated through the plaster overhead. By daylight, I'd occasionally glimpse the man from upstairs, Silas Thorne, descending in the elevator, clad in the uniform of the city, a suit slightly rumpled. His face bore the familiar stamp of fatigue, his hair unremarkable, always seeming pressed for time. I'd offer a tentative smile, a hesitant greeting. He might return a curt nod, a mumbled morning, but nothing more substantial ever passed between us. Our paths rarely intersected. I worked remotely from my apartment while he departed with the dawn chorus and returned under the cloak of late evening. Did my own muffled television sounds bother him? I'd wondered, only to recall the legendary thickness of these walls. We were insulated, fortunate if even a whisper traversed the divide. Except I heard everything. Every night. I learned to anticipate the clock's approach to 11. Why that precise hour I never fathomed, but its arrival heralded a familiar tension coiling in my chest. Lounging on my sofa, perhaps adrift in the blue light of my phone or half watching some flickering drama, my concentration would inevitably fray. True engagement became impossible, overshadowed by the knowledge of what was imminent. And then, infallibly, the symphony would commence. Those slow, ponderous footfalls, one after another, heavy tread upon heavy tread. Brief pauses punctuated the rhythm, seconds stretching taut, before the signature sound returned, that laborious dragging, evocative of a heavy table or chest being relentlessly repositioned. A low, rasping scrape followed by another sequence of thuds that set my ceiling lamp quivering. By then, sleep was a distant shore. My heart would be galloping, a frantic drum against my ribs, my palms slick with a nervous dampness. Ignore it, I'd command myself. Perhaps Silas was simply plagued by restlessness, an insomniac pacing away the lonely hours, or maybe he possessed a peculiar nocturnal habit of rearranging his domain. but the sounds defied mundane explanations. They felt too purposeful, too ritualistic. The performance would last roughly an hour, sometimes more, sometimes less, then cease with unnerving abruptness. In the ensuing silence, I'd lie rigid in bed, straining for any recurrence, any lingering scrape or stomp. Sleep, when it came, was shallow, often shattered by a sudden, phantom thud, jolting me back to anxious wakefulness. My existence settled into a disquieting loop. Daytime quiet, nocturnal disturbance, morning's deceptive normalcy. One night, frayed patience snapped. Enough. Clad in sleepwear but shod and armed with a torch against the hallway's temperamental fluorescence, I resolved to confront the source. It was nearing midnight. Yet, as I eased my door open, the corridor outside lay steeped in an almost vacuum-like silence. Only the low electric hum of the lights disturbed the stillness. No footsteps from above, no scraping, no dragging. Nothing. Hesitation flickered at the elevator doors. Retreat? But the nervous energy propelling me was too potent. I pressed the button, ascended one floor. The doors slid back, revealing another empty, silent hallway. No sliver of light beneath Silas Thorne's door, no murmur of habitation. I approached, knocked softly, then with more force. Silence answered. Pressing my ear to the wood, I listened intently. Not a breath, not the faintest whisper of a radio. After a long minute defeated, I retreated downstairs. The instant my head touched the pillow, the familiar concert resumed. Dragging, stomping, more dragging. My eyes flew open. A cold, prickling awareness crawled up the back of my neck. I glanced at the clock, 11:20 p.m. Tentative inquiries with neighbors on my floor yielded nothing. Some confessed to using earplugs. Others claimed blissful ignorance, hearing not a peep. Mr. Henderson, the building superintendent, offered a shrug and platitudes about thick walls, suggesting perhaps a shared structural beam or errant pipe conducted sound uniquely to my apartment. His advice: ignore it. And so, for a time, I tried. Then, roughly 3 weeks ago, a new strangeness surfaced. I hadn't seen Silas Thorne in days. A business trip, I assumed, but the 11 o'clock noises persisted, undiminished. The scraping, the footfalls, the intermittent thuds, all present, loud as ever. One evening, determined, I stayed awake, movie playing, waiting. The moment the first sound echoed from above, I bolted into the hallway. Again, profound silence reigned outside my door. Stillness, no echoes, no movement. Back inside, the overhead activity continued, punctual and insistent. A morning encounter with Mr. Henderson in the lobby shifted the ground beneath my feet. He inquired casually if I possessed any contact details for the tenant on the 4th floor. I shook my head. That's when he dropped the bombshell, his tone matter of fact. Silas Thorne had vacated the premises weeks ago, possibly closer to a month. The keys were returned, the apartment officially empty. A sickening lurch seized my stomach. But I heard noises, I stammered, just last night, from up there. Impossible, he countered firmly. The unit was vacant. I clamped my mouth shut then, unwilling to sound unhinged, but a tightness gripped my chest, a cold dread that shadowed the remainder of my day. That night, precisely on schedule, the noises returned. I sat immobile in my armchair, gaze fixed on the ceiling, my hands betraying a slight tremor. Above me, the floorboards groaned under the weight of heavy steps. It sounded like multiple sets of feet now, though perhaps it was just one entity moving with frantic energy. The scraping resumed, a harsh counterpoint. My light fixture swayed gently. Fine particles of dust drifted down from the ceiling's edges in the dim light. My mouth felt like parchment. A desperate urge to flee upstairs warred with an equally powerful sense of foreboding. Empty. The place was supposed to be empty, yet the unmistakable sounds of occupation echoed directly overhead. My trembling fingers fumbled with my phone, dialing Mr. Henderson's mobile, voicemail. I began to pace my narrow living room, the rhythmic thumping from above a maddening metronome. Call the authorities, but what would I report? Strange sounds from a confirmed empty apartment? My mind churned through improbable scenarios. Squatters? A vagrant who'd discovered an unsecured entry? Unsanctioned work by a rogue contractor? But the timing, always 11, and the nature of the sounds, dragging furniture, defied logical trespass. The following day, spurred by a need for tangible proof, I waited until the safe, silent afternoon hours. Elevator humming, I ascended, reached the 4th floor door, tried the handle, locked solid. Pressing my ear flat against the cool wood, I strained. Utter silence. I scanned the corridor window, checked for any sign of forced entry along the doorframe. Nothing amiss. The door itself wore a thin coat of dust. The handle felt cold, untouched. I lingered there for minutes, a profound unease settling deep in my gut before finally retreating downstairs, the mystery deepening. Evening descended. Errands completed, a hasty dinner consumed, I sought refuge in the television's distracting glow. By 10:30, the familiar anxiety began its insidious creep. My heart rate quickened preemptively. Every minor creak within my own apartment made me jump. At 10:55, I extinguished all the lights, sinking into the darkness of my sofa, listening. 11:01. The first thud resonated seemingly above the kitchen area, then another closer to the living room ceiling. The footsteps commenced their methodical patrol. My breath grew shallow, constricted. Quietly, I stole to my front door, cracked it open, listened to the hallway. Silence, not a whisper. I retreated, securing the lock. Instantly, the footsteps and scraping sounds resumed their performance overhead. Switching on my phone's torch, I aimed its beam upwards. Tiny flakes of paint dislodged near the cornices with each heavy impact. I could feel the vibrations now, low and resonant, traveling through the building's structure, up from the floor beneath my feet. Then came a protracted scraping sound, long and drawn out, as if some cumbersome object was being dragged the entire length of the apartment above. Gooseflesh erupted across my skin. My heart hammered violently, a pressure building behind my ears. Words began tumbling out, whispers into the oppressive quiet. This isn't real, it's empty up there. But the noises mocked my denial, relentless. The tension solidified into a persistent ache between my shoulder blades. Ignoring it was no longer an option. Keys and phone clenched in my hand, I stormed back out, taking the stairs this time, 2 at a time, landing heavily on the 4th floor landing. I stood before the door, hand hovering near the knob, trembling visibly. I tried it again, locked, ear pressed against the wood once more, cold, lifeless, utterly silent on the other side. I stood panting, mind reeling in confusion. If anyone was inside, surely I'd hear something from this proximity, but the hallway offered only the low hum of the aged light fixture. Dust motes danced in my phone's beam. After moments suspended in silent listening, I turned, descended the stairs back to my own floor, let myself in, locked the door. The moment I sank onto the sofa, the noises recommenced above. It defied reason, as if the sound itself was hermetically sealed within that upper space, audible only from my apartment directly below. The next day, I recounted everything to Mr. Henderson, pleading this time. He reiterated the facts: empty unit, previous tenant gone, no other key holders. Perhaps, he offered again, less confidently now, it was the ancient plumbing, pipes expanding and contracting in the night. The explanation felt flimsy, insulting. I knew the groans of pipes. This was the distinct cadence of footfalls, the grating friction of weight being moved. We argued briefly, fruitlessly, ending with his resigned shrug and admission of bafflement. Frustration warred with a growing sense of isolation. I took to sleeping in the living room, leaving the television murmuring through the night, a futile attempt to mask the intrusion. It barely helped. The footsteps, the dragging, pierced the electronic babble with unwavering intensity. Some nights the fear became overwhelming, driving me out into the cool night air, walking aimlessly around the block until the panic subsided, only to return to the same relentless sounds. My anxiety gnawed at my appetite. Meals were skipped, my stomach perpetually clenched. One night, the dragging escalated. It persisted for a solid hour, a continuous, agonizing scrape traveling back and forth across the expanse above. My ceiling light fixture swayed rhythmically with the vibrations. I felt certain something structural was about to yield. My chest felt vice-tight, my forehead beaded with cold sweat. I paced, checked the time incessantly, phone clutched, ready to call. Who? My hands shook uncontrollably. My pulse throbbed visibly in my neck. Around midnight, the scraping finally ceased. The footfalls slowed, faded into silence. I collapsed onto the floor, utterly spent, wrestling with the terrifying thought that perhaps my own mind was betraying me. But my ears weren't lying. The vibrations were real. The thought of contacting the unit's owner flickered, but Mr. Henderson, likely deeming me a nuisance by now, offered no details. The urge to force the lock, to break in and confront the emptiness, or whatever resided there, gnawed at me. Yet the potential consequences, the sheer irrationality, held me back. So now I sit, night after night, waiting. The sounds always arrive. Silas Thorne is gone. The apartment is vacant, yet the phantom symphony of footsteps and dragging furniture continues, punctual and profane. I feel trapped in this auditory purgatory. One part of me screams to march upstairs, shatter the lock, and face the unknown. Another, colder part whispers that some doors are best left unopened. Perhaps ignorance is a fragile shield I should cling to. But the noises offer no respite. If anything, they seem to bleed beyond their appointed hour, sometimes beginning earlier, closer to 10:30, stretching past midnight. Sleep is a forgotten luxury. Clear thought feels impossible. The throb in my temple starts with the anticipation, intensifies with the first thud. Each morning greets me with bruised shadows beneath my eyes and a persistent, dull ache deep in my chest. I haven't confided in friends. The fear of being perceived as unstable silences me, but denial is a crumbling wall. Should I simply cut my losses? Flee this old building, its cheap rent suddenly seeming a poor bargain for sanity. Moving requires resources I currently lack, so I remain night after night, captive audience to the impossible. It's 10:55 p.m. now. I'm hunched at my small kitchen table, fingers flying across keys, needing to anchor this experience in words. Already, I brace myself. My hands have developed a persistent tremor. My throat is dry. I swallow repeatedly. Beside me, a window pane rattles softly in a rising breeze, a natural sound easily lost in the imminent unnatural one. My gaze drifts upwards inevitably to the plaster ceiling. My stomach churns. A faint creak sounds from above, precisely on cue. My heart accelerates. I hear it, a slow, deliberate step overhead. Then another. My ceiling lamp shivers almost imperceptibly. My chest constricts. The scraping begins, a low, guttural sound that vibrates not just through the apartment, but through my very bones. I press my hands over my ears, a useless gesture. The sound permeates, invasive. My lungs feel compressed. My mind races, a frantic spiral of fear and confusion. My back is slick with cold perspiration. What generates these sounds? Is it human? Something else entirely? Or am I merely attuned to some bizarre acoustic anomaly of this ancient groaning structure? But it feels real. I feel it in the marrow, this nightly violation. What is the right course? Ascend again. Force the issue. Force the door. Risk utter humiliation with Mr. Henderson. Or continue this passive endurance pretending the impossible isn't happening directly above my head. Right now, the footsteps are heavy, relentless. My ceiling protests with soft groans beneath each tread. The scraping noise intensifies, louder tonight, raw and grating. A faint ringing starts in my ears. I am bone-weary, and I am profoundly afraid. I possess no tangible proof, only the undeniable evidence of my senses, the chilling knowledge that something moves in the locked, empty apartment above. Vacant, Mr. Henderson insists. Empty. But the noise is as clear as my own ragged breathing, and it shows no sign of stopping. This, I suppose, is where my story rests. No harm has befallen anyone physically. No other soul in this building seems disturbed. I am alone with this haunting refrain, losing sleep, losing ground. I cannot sustain this siege indefinitely, yet the prospect of confronting whatever occupies that space paralyzes me. Not yet. For now I sit here, hands shaking, jaw clenched, listening to the steady, rhythmic thud of footfalls pacing the floor of the locked, empty apartment directly above my head. Perhaps tomorrow courage will find me, or perhaps it won't. I truly don't know. All I know is this current reality, this nightly vigil waiting for that first thud just after 11, and so it continues. The wilderness beckoned, a siren song promising escape. Just myself, my brother Elias, and our friends Finn and Clara. Gear crammed into packs, spirits high, we craved a weekend steeped in silence, far from the city's relentless hum and the phantom vibrations of our phones. Disconnection felt less like a choice, more like a necessity. We were no strangers to camping, but this venture plunged deeper, chasing a spot Elias unearthed from some obscure corner of an online forum. Isolated, hushed, untrammeled by casual wanderers. precisely the void we sought. The journey itself was an unwinding ribbon of asphalt, snaking through mountains that scraped the sky, roads narrowing until they felt less like paths and more like intrusions. When the car finally sighed to a halt at the trailhead, the air bit with a delicious coolness, thick with the resinous perfume of pine. No signal bars, no other vehicles, just the four of us poised on the edge of the immense quiet. Perfect. An hour's trek carried us inward, laughter echoing briefly before being swallowed by the trees. Backpacks laden with shelter, sustenance, and the tools of temporary survival settled comfortably against our spines. It was intoxicating, this detachment. The forest path eventually spilled into a modest clearing, encircled by colossal trees that dwarfed us, their peaks lost in the canopy. A nearby creek murmured its endless liquid tune, enhancing the profound peace. Tents sprang up, a small pyre of gathered wood awaited the spark, and we sank into the embrace of what promised to be an untroubled night beneath a canopy of stars. As dusk bled into night, we huddled near the fire's hypnotic dance, sacrificing marshmallows to the flames, conversation meandering like the stream beside us. Darkness descended swiftly, thick and absolute, save for the fire's capricious glow and the distant, indifferent glitter of stars. It was a silence unknown in the urban sprawl, a stillness so profound it felt weighted, almost sentient. At some juncture, Elias rose, murmuring something about investigating the creek's edge. His absence was brief, yet he returned cloaked in an unfamiliar tension. "Anyone," he began, his voice pitched low, oddly resonant in the quiet. "Go down by the water since we arrived." A collective shake of heads met his query. None of us had strayed near the creek bed. "There are prints," Elias stated, his gaze sweeping the impenetrable blackness beyond the firelight's reach. "Impressions, large ones." My initial thought was a prank, a setup for a ghost story, but the stark gravity etched onto his face, the absence of any mischievous glint in his eyes, dispelled that notion. He was utterly serious, and that seriousness coiled unpleasantly in my gut. "Bear, maybe?" Finn offered with a shrug, ever the pragmatist. "Or just some hiker who passed through earlier." Elias conceded with a muttered, "Perhaps," but the doubt lingered, visible even in the flickering light. The remainder of the night unfolded without overt incident, yet an invisible current of unease flowed beneath the surface. Every twig snap, every rustle of unseen foliage drew my eyes toward the darkness. Imagination, I chided myself. Woods make noises. Eventually we retreated, zipping ourselves into nylon cocoons, surrendering to our sleeping bags. The forest resumed its quietude, punctuated only by the desolate cry of an owl or the sigh of wind through high branches. Something tore me from sleep in the dead of night. Not a distinct sound, perhaps, but that primal prickling, the subconscious alarm that signals wrongness. My small tent felt suddenly constricting. Beside me, Elias breathed the even rhythm of sleep. All seemed tranquil, yet the feeling persisted, a knot tightening in my chest. Silently, I worked the tent zipper, easing my head into the chill night air. The fire had dwindled to pulsing embers, casting a weak, ruddy wash over the immediate campsite. Trees loomed, immense silhouettes against a star-dusted sky, their branches swaying like arthritic fingers. And then I saw them, footprints, not confined to the creek bank this time, but describing a distinct circle around our tents. Huge, unmistakable gouges in the soft earth. My heart hammered against my ribs. I slipped out, bare feet meeting the cold ground, trying to process the sight. The prints were far too large for any of us, their edges sharp, undeniably fresh, as if someone or something had paced the perimeter while we slept. Crouching, I traced the outline of one impression, feeling the depth, sensing the immense weight required to leave such a mark. My gaze darted into the surrounding blackness, half expecting eyes to glint back, but there was only the oppressive stillness, the silent trees. I retreated back into the tent, quiet as a breath, my mind a frantic scramble. Wake the others? Incite panic. Over what? Footprints in the dirt. It could be nothing. Sleep, however, remained elusive. I lay rigid, ears straining against the canvas, every nocturnal whisper amplified. The image of those deep impressions seared behind my eyelids. Morning arrived, pale and cool. I said nothing of my nocturnal discovery, reasoning that fear was contagious and perhaps unfounded. Why terrify everyone over prints that might possess a mundane explanation? A lost hiker, a large animal, my mind clung to normalcy. We filled the day with forced exploration, hiking deeper, admiring a cascade that tumbled down moss-slicked rocks. The beauty was undeniable, the peace tangible, yet the sensation of being observed, a prickle on the back of my neck, never fully dissipated. Occasionally, I'd see Elias pause, his head cocked, scanning the tree line. The same tension I felt mirrored in his posture. That evening, the fire seemed less welcoming, its light pushing back a darkness that felt more encroaching than the night before. Laughter felt hollow, conversation strained. An unspoken apprehension hung heavy in the air, a shared suspicion none dared to voice. Finn eventually broke the spell, stretching elaborately. "Think I'll turn in," he announced. "Got a long hike out tomorrow." We murmured agreement. Exhaustion warred with the unnamed dread. As we prepared to extinguish the fire and retreat, my eyes caught movement. No, not movement, but its aftermath. More prints. Not merely circling now, but leading distinctly away from the edge of the firelight, back into the dense woods, as if something had stood just beyond our sightline, watching before melting back into the trees. They were fresh, disturbingly so. "Elias," I hissed, barely a whisper, beckoning him with a jerk of my head. He followed my pointing finger, and the blood drained from his face as he registered the tracks. "We have to leave," he breathed, the words almost lost to the night. "Now." There was no argument, no hesitation. The wrongness was palpable now, undeniable. We moved with furtive haste, gathering essentials, the instinct to flee overriding all else. We hadn't yet woken Finn and Clara when a sound shattered the quiet, a low, guttural rumble emanating from the black depths of the forest. We froze, every muscle taut, eyes locked on the unseen source. It came again, closer this time, a vibration felt as much as heard, crawling up my spine like ice. This was no bear. This sound was ancient, predatory, and utterly alien. "Get them up," Elias urged, his voice tight with barely suppressed panic. I shook Finn and Clara awake, my own voice trembling as I relayed the situation in urgent whispers. Sleep-fogged confusion yielded quickly to raw fear mirroring our own. Grabbing packs, we stumbled towards the trail, the growling, a menacing echo pursuing us through the trees. My pulse roared in my ears, my imagination painting horrific scenarios in the shifting shadows. Every rustle was a threat, every gnarled branch a potential assailant. Then, as abruptly as it began, the growling ceased. Silence slammed back in, thick and unnerving. I kept glancing back, expecting pursuit, a monstrous shape bursting from the undergrowth. Nothing. We plunged onward in a tense, breathless rush, the only sound the frantic crunch of our boots on the leaf litter. Time stretched and distorted until, finally, blessedly, the familiar shape of Elias's car emerged from the gloom. Gear was flung haphazardly into the trunk, doors slammed shut, sealing us inside a fragile metal shell. Elias's hands trembled as he jammed the key into the ignition, the engine roaring to life. Headlights sliced through the darkness, illuminating the trailhead, the silent, watching trees. Nothing visible, just the woods, still and profoundly empty. We drove for a long time without speaking, the miles dissolving the immediate terror but not the lingering chill. The feeling of being watched, of having brushed against something vast and unseen just beyond the veil of the ordinary, clung to me. What stalked us in those woods remains unknown, an unsettling question mark carved into memory. An animal, perhaps, or perhaps something else entirely, something ancient and territorial, disturbed by our brief intrusion. I only know this. I have never returned to that deep, silent forest, and the memory ensures I never will. Phantoms, fetches, the susurrus of the unseen. Such notions belong to the realm of folklore, whispers for darkened rooms, not the solid world I inhabited. My disbelief was granite, unshakable, until the timbers of that remote lodge bore witness to a night that fractured my certainty. What unfolded beneath its sagging roof was no mere phantasm of fatigue. It resists the neat compartments of logic, leaving an indelible sense that I brushed against something utterly other, something terribly real. The lodge was Uncle Silas's inheritance, a relic perched deep in the woods, passed down yet seldom visited. Too remote, the family murmured, or perhaps the surrounding forest held an unnerving quality, a stillness that felt watchful. Such whispers meant little to me. I saw only timbers and solitude, an escape hatch from the relentless thrum of my life. When Silas offered it for a solitary retreat, I seized the opportunity without a second thought. Autumn was bleeding towards winter. The air possessed that crystalline sharpness presaging frost. Trees clawed at the bruised twilight sky. Skeletal fingers stripped bare as I navigated the serpentine track leading deeper into the wilderness. The lodge itself was more dilapidated than memory served. Shingles curled like old parchment, window panes fractured, viridian moss scaling the weathered planks. Yet its decay held a certain austere beauty, the expected patina of a woodland hermitage. The sun, a molten coin slipping below the horizon, drenched the skeletal woods in amber and stretched shadows into long, distorted specters by the time I arrived. Slinging my duffel, I turned the archaic key Silas had pressed into my hand. It grated, a rusty protest before the door groaned inward, a miasma of damp timber and settled dust. The scent of long unbreathed air greeted me. The main room was Spartan, threadbare armchairs huddled around a cavernous, soot-stained fireplace that looked long dormant. I dropped my bag, the sound swallowed by the quiet, and immediately set about coaxing a blaze to life, pushing back the chill that had already begun to infiltrate the space. Flames eventually blossomed, their hesitant crackle a welcome counterpoint to the silence, radiating a warmth that slowly unknotted the tension coiled in my shoulders. I retrieved a novel, sank into the embrace of a worn chair, and surrendered to the hypnotic dance of the firelight. Outside, the wind sighed through the pines, a mournful descant punctuated by the occasional groan of the lodge, settling deeper into the earth. It was a profound quietude, the very balm I had sought. But later, much later, when the fire had dwindled to a ruby glow of embers, the sound came, a rapping, distinct, not the erratic tap of a wind-flung branch against the siding. This was measured, deliberate. Knock, knock, knock. A slow, even cadence upon the heavy front door. I went utterly still, my pulse leaping. Outside, the wind moaned, a lonely sound, but the knocking ceased as abruptly as it began. Silence flooded back, thick and expectant. I waited, breath held, listening. Nothing. A nervous laugh escaped me, thin in the stillness. The wind, surely, or the old wood contracting in the cold. Nothing more. Rising, I moved towards the cramped kitchen alcove for water, attempting to dispel the unease prickling beneath my skin. The kitchen was rudimentary, its appliances relics. A single grimy window framing the impenetrable blackness of the woods. As I filled a glass, my gaze drifted outward, sweeping the dense tree line, and then I saw it, a silhouette impossibly tall and slender, poised just within the forest's edge, featureless in the gloom, yet undeniably present. Watching, I blinked hard, heart hammering against my ribs. I looked again. Gone, vanished. Only the void remained, the trees swaying like dark sentinels. A trick of the eye, I insisted inwardly, a shadow born of flickering embers and fatigued perception. Yet the knot of dread in my gut refused to loosen. I retreated to the main room, the sensation of being observed clinging like frost. The fire was nearly extinguished, its final embers pulsing weakly. A profound cold now permeated the lodge, seeping through unseen fissures in the walls. Pulling a rough blanket from the sofa, I huddled back into the armchair. Then, as a fragile calm began to settle once more, it returned. The knock. 3 unhurried, resonant raps upon the door. My breath hitched. Not the wind, not the house. The sound was too solid, too intentional. Someone, something, waited outside. Slowly, propelled by a morbid curiosity that warred with every self-preservatory instinct, I rose. My heart thudded a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I reached the door, hesitated, the cold brass of the knob biting into my palm, then turned it and pulled. Emptiness greeted me. The small porch lay bare beneath the indifferent stars. The only sound was the sibilant rush of wind through the pines. I stepped onto the threshold, my breath pluming white in the frigid air, scanning the perimeter. Nothing. No disturbance in the thin layer of fallen leaves. No tracks in the damp earth. Just the looming forest and the groaning lodge at my back. I was turning to retreat inside when a flicker of movement at the periphery caught my eye. Beyond the tree line, the figure stood there again, motionless, a deeper darkness against the shadowed woods, barely discernible yet radiating an unnerving stillness. I couldn't discern a face, limbs, anything definite, but the pressure of its attention was palpable. Raw panic surged. I stumbled backward towards the door, eyes locked on the shape, the hairs on my nape prickling. Then, as swiftly as it had materialized, it receded, melting back into the impenetrable black between the trees. I slammed the door, the bolt rasping home, my hands trembling uncontrollably. Rationality offered flimsy shields, shadow play, overwrought nerves, but a deeper, colder certainty had taken root. I was not alone here. The remainder of the night dissolved into a strained vigil. I fed the fire obsessively piling on logs, yet the pervasive chill remained, a cold that seemed to emanate not from the night air but from the very bones of the place. Sleep was unthinkable. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind rattling the windows sent jolts of adrenaline through me. My gaze darted constantly towards the dark panes, half expecting to see the silhouette pressed against the glass. It never reappeared. When the first tentative rays of dawn filtered through the skeletal branches, painting the gloom in shades of gray, I was already packed. Another minute within those walls was intolerable. I hauled my duffel to the car, the engine roaring to life in the pre-dawn stillness, and fled down the winding track, the lodge shrinking in my rearview mirror. I never recounted the events of that night to Silas, fearful of ridicule, uncertain he would comprehend. But the lodge remains unvisited by me, a place cordoned off in memory. Whatever presence haunted those woods, it felt ancient, patient, and I carry the chilling conviction that its vigil was not concluded merely by my departure. The illusion of sanctuary shattered the instant my eyes fell upon the folded paper resting starkly against the duvet. Jagged script clawed across the page, "You can't hide from me." Just like that, the sprawling manor ceased being a refuge and became a gilded cage, with me, its unwitting quarry. My name is Ilara, a doctoral candidate bartering solitude for stipend, guardian of the opulent vacancy left by the Sterlings. Easy remuneration, I'd mused. A month tending their palatial estate while they toured European capitals. Keep the flora hydrated, the aquarium inhabitants fed, indulge in the cerulean pool and private cinema. What potential for misfortune lingered in such tranquil duties? As fate decreed, everything. Innocence marked the initial days. A week I'd resided within those walls, habituating myself to the rhythm of the grand house. The Sterlings, meticulous to a fault, had provided a tome of directives, watering schedules calibrated to specific cultivars, protocols for the labyrinthine security system, even choreographed lighting sequences to mimic occupancy. My hours dissolved into thesis research, poolside contemplation, and the quiet exploration of the mansion's vastness. It was a residence of perpetual discovery, studies giving way to guest wings, leading down to a cavernous wine cellar. The Sterlings undeniably embraced extravagance. Day 8 ushered in the dissonance. I stood in the cavernous kitchen, assembling a solitary dinner, when a definitive thump resonated from the upper gallery, like ballast dropped carelessly onto floorboards. I froze, spatula suspended midair, ears straining against the sudden, profound silence that followed. Is anyone there? The words felt absurdly fragile in the echoing space. Alone, utterly alone. Perhaps the old house merely settling its bones, or an object surrendering to gravity in some forgotten room. Yet an undeniable tremor of unease had taken root. Extinguishing the flame beneath my pan, I ascended the main staircase, each step deliberate, my pulse a frantic drum against my ribs. The upper landing unfurled before me, a corridor steeped in shadow, resembling the maw of some dormant beast. Light switches clicked under my hesitant touch, chasing shadows deeper into corners as I inspected each chamber. Nothing amiss, no toppled heirlooms, no breached windows. All remained precisely as curated. Ready to dismiss the sound as a phantom of my own making, I turned back towards the stairs. Then I saw it. The heavy oak door to Mr. Sterling's private study stood slightly ajar. I distinctly recalled securing it. Jasper, their pampered Persian, possessed a penchant for sharpening his claws on the costly leather appointments within. A tremor ran through my hand as I pushed the door wider. The room, bathed in the wan afternoon light, seemed undisturbed until my gaze snagged on the artwork dominating the wall behind the immense desk. A tedious pastoral landscape, likely valued more than my entire academic pursuit, hung conspicuously crooked. Slowly, drawn by an instinct that screamed retreat, I approached. My fingers, betraying my inner turmoil with their quiver, reached out to right the frame. Beneath it, a subtle indentation marred the wall's smooth surface. A vault, naturally. The Sterlings would possess a hidden repository, but the heavy steel door wasn't perfectly flush. A sliver of profound darkness betrayed its incomplete closure. My thoughts raced. Had I triggered some mechanism unknowingly? Impossible. Its existence had been unknown to me mere moments ago. The implication was chilling. Someone else had been here. I recoiled, breath catching in shallow, painful gasps. Police, escape. The imperatives warred within me. I spun, intent on flight, and collided with a solid mass. Flesh and bone colliding where only air should be. A strangled cry escaped me as I lashed out blindly. My fist met resistance, followed by a low grunt. Fueled by sheer adrenaline, I shoved past the unseen figure, hurtling towards the study door. Halfway down the grand staircase, an iron grip seized my ankle. I crashed downwards, my chin striking unforgiving marble. Prismatic bursts flared behind my eyes. The coppery tang of blood filled my mouth. "Not so fast," rasped a coarse, unfamiliar male voice, chillingly devoid of warmth. I kicked backward, a surge of desperate triumph coursing through me as my heel connected with yielding flesh. The grip slackened. Scrambling upright, nearly tumbling again in my frantic haste, I bolted for the colossal front entrance, fingers fumbling with the intricate locks. Freedom was a breath away when a crushing weight slammed into my back, propelling us both violently onto the ornate flagstone porch. We wrestled there beneath the indifferent gaze of gargoyles carved into the eaves. My struggle born of primal terror, his movements calculated, predatory. He possessed superior size, undeniable strength, yet my ferocity seemed to catch him off guard. He hadn't anticipated such resistance. A sharp elbow driven into his solar plexus elicited a satisfying whoosh of expelled air. That momentary reprieve was all I needed. I tore free and ran. The Sterling grounds were immense, a sculpted tapestry of botanical perfection. Now, under the fading twilight, the meticulously pruned hedges and serpentine pathways became a treacherous maze. I ran without direction, propelled solely by the need for distance, the pounding of his pursuing footsteps on the gravel path, a terrifying metronome drawing ever closer. Abandoning the path, I plunged through a fragrant, immaculately tended flower bed, crashing into a dense copse of ornamental trees. Branches lashed my face, stinging reminders of the chase, but I didn't dare falter. Eventually, the sound of pursuit faded. I allowed myself to slow, dragging great, ragged breaths into my burning lungs. Every muscle screamed in protest. Blood trickled warmly from abrasions on my arms and face. As my respiration steadied, I attempted to assess my predicament. Lost somewhere within the wooded perimeter of the Sterling estate, my phone, a lifeline, remained tethered to its charger in the distant kitchen. The path back, or towards the main road, was obscured by gathering darkness, and somewhere within that darkness, a man whose intentions I dared not contemplate was hunting. A strategy was imperative. Foremost, communication. The Sterlings had neighbors, though the nearest dwelling lay a formidable quarter-mile distant. If I could reach it. A twig snapped sharply to my left. I froze, breath held captive in my chest. "I know you're out here." The man's voice drifted through the trees, unnervingly close. "You're only making this harder on yourself." Motionless, I became one with the shadows, praying the encroaching night would grant me concealment. "You saw something you shouldn't have," he continued, his tone attempting a veneer of reason. "But we can work this out. Just come out. We'll talk." A fool's bargain. I'd witnessed enough narratives to foresee the grim conclusion of such a parley. With painstaking slowness, I began to edge away from the sound of his voice, each footfall measured, deliberate, seeking silent purchase on the leaf litter. I'd covered perhaps 20 feet when my shoe encountered not yielding earth, but smooth, cold metal. Glancing down, a surge of near-hysterical relief washed over me, a maintenance hatch for the estate's intricate sprinkler system, and beside it, nestled in a weatherproof box, a service telephone for the groundskeeping crew. Hands shaking uncontrollably, I wrestled the box open. "Please work, please function," I chanted silently, lifting the receiver. A dial tone, blessed, beautiful sound. My fingers flew across the keypad, dialing 911, my gaze ceaselessly scanning the surrounding gloom. The dispatcher's calm voice was an anchor. I whispered my plight, my location. "Help is on the way," she promised. "Stay on the line if you can." Before I could utter a response, a hand clamped brutally over my mouth. The receiver was wrenched from my grasp. I heard it shatter against a nearby tree trunk. "Clever girl," the man hissed directly into my ear, his breath hot and unwelcome, "but not clever enough." I slammed my elbow backward, connecting solidly with his ribs. He grunted, but his grip held fast. Thrashing wildly, I kicked, clawed, fought with the desperation of a cornered animal. We tumbled in a chaotic tangle of limbs, rolling across the damp forest floor. The struggle shifted, leaving me momentarily astride him. Blind instinct took over, a primal surge guiding my hand to the heft of a nearby rock. I brought it down, hard, against the side of his head. He went instantly limp beneath me. A terrifying stillness followed. Had I? No, the shallow rise and fall of his chest confirmed he was merely unconscious. Scrambling away from him, my entire body vibrating with reaction, I heard it, the distant rising wail of sirens. Help was truly coming. I had done it. I had survived. The ensuing hours dissolved into a disorienting montage. Uniformed officers fanning across the property, paramedics tending my superficial wounds, detectives patiently recording my fractured account. The man, I learned, was a seasoned burglar who'd been surveilling the Sterling residence for weeks, targeting a collection of rare coins sequestered in the very safe I'd inadvertently discovered, coins whose existence had been utterly unknown to me. As the adrenaline ebbed, the stark reality of the ordeal settled upon me. The proximity of true danger, the tangible threat of annihilation. But I hadn't succumbed. I had fought. I had strategized. I had endured. The Sterlings, curtailing their European sojourn, returned the following day. Their horror at the violation of their home was palpable, exceeded only by their gratitude for my safety and the thwarting of the theft. A substantial bonus was offered, which, mindful of the relentless costs of graduate education, I gratefully accepted. Returning to the house to pack was untenable. Every elongated shadow seemed to harbor menace, each settling groan of the structure a potential footfall. Yet, packing my few belongings, I caught my reflection in a hallway mirror. The cuts and bruises were stark against my pale skin, but something else resided in my gaze now. A flinty resolve absent before, an unexpected core of confidence. I had confronted a visceral fear and emerged, altered but intact. Whatever challenges lay ahead, a newfound certainty resonated within me. I could face them. Driving away from the Sterling estate for the final time, a complex blend of emotions swirled within me. Profound relief, the lingering phantom of fear, and an undeniable spark of pride. A doctoral candidate versus a hardened criminal. The outcome had been far from certain, yet I had prevailed. House-sitting seemed an unlikely prospect for the foreseeable future, but self-defense classes suddenly held immense appeal, as did reinforcing the security of my own modest apartment. Because the most crucial lesson learned amidst the terror was starkly simple. The moment demanding a fight for one's life can arrive unforeseen. And when it does, readiness is everything. The corrugated sarcophagus, far heavier than its unassuming form suggested, groaned as Thea wrestled it from the highest shelf, its internal burden shifting like uneasy ballast. Professor Thorne's office, a labyrinth crammed with the ghosts of forgotten theories, books piled like geological strata, artifacts whispering silent histories, filing cabinets overflowing with academic detritus, seemed to hold its breath around this particular container. Unmarked, it was bound fast by thick, brittle tape, the color of old parchment. A tremor, unrelated to the physical exertion, traced its way up her spine as she lowered the box onto the scarred surface of the desk. An intuition, cold and sharp, warned she was trespassing on forbidden ground. Thea Vance, that's me, doctoral candidate by day, temporary custodian of neglected flora by night, and now, it seemed, reluctant archaeologist excavating a mystery buried in plain sight. It began with such mundane simplicity. Professor Thorne, her dissertation supervisor, a man whose thoughts always seemed leagues ahead of his physical presence, had requested she mind his apartment during a scholarly pilgrimage to Europe. "Tend the ferns, retrieve the post," he'd murmured, the keys exchanged with an abstracted air. "Oh, and perhaps impose a modicum of order on my study. Capital." He'd neglected to mention his study resembled a collision between a bibliotheca and a cabinet of curiosities, followed by a localized textual explosion. Days she'd spent adrift in that paper sea, navigating drifts of monographs, charting islands of periodicals, attempting to map the intellectual chaos. And then, lodged high like a cryptic message in a bottle, she found the box. Hesitation became a physical weight in the air. Her fingers hovered above the aged tape. This wasn't part of the brief. The sensible course was clear. Return it to its dusty perch. Feign ignorance. But curiosity, that insidious silver-tongued serpent, coiled in her gut, whispering irresistible possibilities. Before reason could marshal its defenses, she seized a tarnished letter opener from the desk's clutter and slit the seal with a decisive rip. A sigh of stale air, thick with the scent of decaying paper and time itself, rose to meet her as the flaps fell open. Within lay a trove of notebooks, their bindings softened by handling, their pages foxed and fragile. Interspersed among them were photographs, brittle newspaper clippings, and documents bearing the stiff formality of officialdom, all relics from a bygone era. She lifted the uppermost journal, its leather cover yielding like old skin beneath her touch. Opening it revealed Professor Thorne's unmistakable script, precise and angular, yet the date inscribed at the page's head, 1987, gave her pause. Thorne would have been barely out of his teens then. As her eyes scanned the first lines, the room dissolved. The claustrophobic study, the metronomic pulse of the grandfather clock in the hall, the distant hum of city life, all receded, consumed by the narrative unfolding under her fingertips. It chronicled Thorne's maiden expedition, a young anthropologist venturing deep into the emerald labyrinth of the Amazon, lured by whispers of an uncontacted people, a tribe possessed of abilities that defied the known laws of existence. What he documented strained credulity. Individuals who conversed without sound, mended flesh with mere contact, possessed knowledge seemingly gleaned from the ether itself. Initially, his entries were steeped in academic skepticism, a search for logical frameworks, but the relentless accumulation of the inexplicable forced a confrontation with the impossible. Flipping through the densely filled pages, her pulse hammered against her ribs. Sepia-toned photographs captured figures adorned with intricate markings that seemed to luminesce faintly in the jungle's perpetual twilight. Detailed botanical sketches depicted flora unknown to science, annotated with notes on their purported transcendental qualities. Accounts of rituals unfolded, ceremonies that appeared to warp the very fabric of physical reality. Yet, as the chronicle progressed, a shadow fell across the script. Enthusiasm curdled into apprehension, then outright fear. The final entries were compressed, the handwriting jagged, bordering on frantic. Thorne wrote of unseen watchers, of unsettling accidents, too perfectly timed to be coincidence. The last page terminated abruptly, mid-sentence, a thought decapitated. She closed the notebook, a tremor in her hands. This had to be fiction, surely. Elaborate world-building, perhaps. Research for some speculative novel. But delving deeper into the box's contents painted a far more disquieting canvas. Official-looking reports surfaced, vast sections obscured by thick black ink, yet fragments leaped out, specimens secured, anomalous aptitude, containment protocol. Yellowed newsprint screamed headlines about the inexplicable vanishing of an entire indigenous community in the Amazon basin. And the photographs, murky, motion-blurred, yet undeniably depicting forms that seemed less human, more phantasmagorical projection. As the disparate pieces clicked into place, a glacial chill seeped into her bones. If this chronicle held even a kernel of truth, Professor Thorne had unearthed something monumental, something terrifying, the sort of revelation powerful entities would move heaven and earth to suppress. But why preserve it? Why leave it accessible, however obscurely? The answer struck with the force of an electric shock. It wasn't negligence, it was a dead man's switch, a guarantee. Should anything befall him, the truth had a chance of surviving. As if summoned by the thought, her mobile phone vibrated sharply against the desk. An anonymous number. The message was brief, brutal. Leave it. Forget everything. Your safety depends on it. Her blood turned to ice water. She scanned the room, the window, expecting eyes staring back from the twilight gathering outside. Nothing. Just the familiar, placid street of a university town settling into its afternoon rhythm. Prudence screamed at her to obey, to reseal the box, erase the last hour from her memory, but the hook was set too deep. The enigma was too profound, its potential ramifications staggering. If Thorne's discovery was genuine, it could rewrite the very definition of humanity. With fingers that still trembled, she began to document everything. Photograph after photograph. The notebook's intimate confessions, the chilling formality of the redacted documents, the haunting ambiguity of the images. Each click of the phone's camera was an act of defiance. The digital copies uploaded instantly to encrypted cloud storage. Whatever ensued, a record would exist. Her mind raced, a frantic torrent of questions. Who sent the text? How could they possibly know? And the most pressing question, where was Professor Thorne truly? Was Europe merely a convenient fiction? So consumed was she by her task, the sound nearly escaped her notice. Heavy, deliberate footfalls echoing in the corridor outside. They stopped directly before the office door. Her heart vaulted into her throat as keys scraped against the lock mechanism. Panic flared. She scrambled, shoving the contents haphazardly back into the box, heedless of order. The flaps were barely closed when the door swung inward. Two figures stood silhouetted against the hallway light. Men in severe, dark suits, their faces impassive masks. Not campus security. One advanced, his hand dipping inside his jacket. "Ms. Vance?" His voice was devoid of inflection, cold as polished steel. We need you to accompany us." She recoiled, mind spinning uselessly. How did they know her name? What did they want? The answers arrived simultaneously, chillingly obvious. They were here for the box, for the secrets Thorne had tried to bury, and she had just unearthed. I don't understand," she stammered, striving for a composure she didn't feel. "Professor Thorne just asked me to water his plants." The man's expression remained unchanged, glacial. "Please, let's not complicate matters. We merely have some inquiries regarding your recent findings." Her gaze darted towards the window. Second floor, a survivable drop, perhaps, if she was fast enough. He anticipated her thought, moving with astonishing swiftness to block her potential escape route. "That would be ill-advised, Ms. Vance. We have no intention of harming you. A conversation is all we require." Yet his eyes held a different promise, a chilling finality that belied his words. Conversation was the furthest thing from their objective. Whatever Thorne had found, whatever Pandora's box she now possessed knowledge of, these men were its designated undertakers. In that suspended moment, clarity pierced through the fear. She couldn't let it end like this, couldn't allow the truth to be suffocated before it could draw breath. Fueled by a surge of pure adrenaline, she snatched the heavy cardboard box and flung it bodily at the two men. In the instant of their startled reaction, she bolted past them, bursting into the empty corridor. She ran, propelled by primal terror, down the echoing stairwell and out into the fading afternoon light. Shouts and the heavy rhythm of pursuit hammered behind her, but she didn't dare look back. She ran, her trainers pounding the pavement, away from the quiet groves of academia and into the anonymous bustle of the town. Gasping for air in the relative sanctuary of a narrow, refuse-strewn alleyway, she leaned against the cool brickwork, the reality crashing down. Her life had just fractured, irrevocably altered. She was entangled in something vast, a conspiracy woven through decades and across continents. The box was gone, but the images were safe. The knowledge was hers. And now a choice loomed. Retreat into the shell of her former existence. Pretend the office, the box, the text, the men had never happened. Or follow the perilous breadcrumbs Professor Thorne had left. Pursue the truth regardless of the cost. The distant wail of sirens grew closer. A sleek black sedan cruised slowly down the adjacent street, its tinted windows reflecting the streetlights like impassive eyes. The choice was made. This wasn't an ending, it was a terrifying genesis. The real quest, the true peril, lay ahead. Casting one final glance back towards the university building, the mausoleum of her ordinary life, Thea Vance turned and melted into the labyrinthine embrace of the city. Whatever waited in the shadows, she would face it. For Thorne, for the silenced tribe, for the astonishing secret that pulsed, waiting beneath the surface of the world. The susurrus of desiccated leaves beneath my soles was a sharp percussion against the profound hush blanketing the woods. 15 years I'd worn the badge of a ranger, yet this particular circuit felt alien. A palpable charge thickened the air, the persistent prickle of unseen eyes tracking my progress, inescapable. Curving around a knot of ancient oaks, I spied it. A rough-hewn encampment secreted within the timber, ground scattered with the brass gleam of spent cartridges and the stark white of animal bones. A cold fist clenched my heart. This was no misplaced hiker, no carelessly tended fire, but something infinitely more predatory. My name is Alara, and this is the chronicle of how a day's standard patrol spiraled into a desperate grapple for life against merciless despoilers of the wild. The outdoors had always been my sanctuary. Raised in a hamlet cupped against the mountain's flank, the forest was more familiar than my own dwelling. Donning the ranger's uniform felt less like a choice, more like destiny, a vow to shield the wilderness that cradled my spirit. Whisperwind Preserve had been my domain for a decade. I knew its arteries of trails, its murmuring creeks, every granite outcrop as intimately as my own reflection. That day commenced under the familiar cloak of dawn. My pack, weighted with necessities for traversing the preserve's less trodden reaches, settled comfortably. Crisp autumn air kissed my face, the forest ablaze in the fiery palette of turning foliage. Crimson, ochre, burnished gold. It ought to have been serene, a tableau of peace. Yet from the first step onto the path, a discordance hummed beneath the surface. The forest's usual symphony, avian calls, the rustle of unseen creatures, leaf fall whispers, was strangely subdued, as though the very woods held their breath in anticipation. I chided myself for paranoia, but 15 years' experience had honed an instinct I dared not ignore. 3 hours into the hike, the anomalies began. Branches snapped with unnatural force, boot impressions too recent, too deeply gouged for casual wanderers. Access had been barred for a week, fire risk cited. Then came the scent, cloying and sweet, churning my stomach with a recognition I abhorred, the unmistakable miasma of decay. Guided by scent and the trail of disruption, I pressed onward, deeper into a sector far removed from marked ways. And there lay the camp, masterfully concealed within a small clearing, shielded by dense thickets. Its unnaturalness screamed at my trained senses. Camouflage tarps stretched taut between trunks, formed crude shelters. A fire pit, engineered for minimal smoke, sat cold at its heart. But it was the periphery that iced my veins. Snares and brutal steel traps. High-caliber rifles propped carelessly against bark, and everywhere, the grisly testament to their enterprise. Piles of cured pelts, severed antlers, grim trophies of slaughter. Whispers of poaching syndicates had drifted through the region, but never had I encountered proof so flagrant. This wasn't opportunistic locals. This was organized, methodical, and radiating danger. My hand sought the radio clipped to my vest, poised to summon aid when a twig cracked sharply behind me. I spun, fingers reflexively closing on the canister of bare deterrent at my hip. Too late. Well now, a voice like grinding stones grated. Seems we've flushed ourselves a curious ranger. 3 figures materialized from the dappled shade, rifles leveled unwaveringly at my sternum. They bore the weathered, unforgiving look of men long accustomed to skirting the law's edge. Their apparent leader, a tall man bisected by a livid scar down one cheek, offered a smile devoid of warmth, pure predator assessing prey. So, he pondered, advancing a step, what's to be done with you? Slowly, I elevated my hands, thoughts scrambling. Listen, I began, striving for a calm I didn't feel. "You don't want this, assaulting a federal officer. It just digs your hole deeper. Let's just talk." He barked a laugh, harsh and jarring in the clearing. "Talk? Honey, you ain't grasping the lay of things. No talking your way out of this one." Another man, younger, his eyes darting nervously, interjected, "Boss, maybe we just truss her up? Leave her make tracks?" The leader shook his head, the motion slight but absolute. "Nah, she's seen the setup, can't afford the risk." My stomach plummeted. The implication hung heavy and cold. These weren't merely poachers. They wouldn't hesitate to kill. In that instant, primal instinct surged. I dropped, simultaneously yanking the deterrent free. As I hit the loam, the sharp report of a rifle split the air. I felt the bullet's displaced wind scorch the space just above my head. I rolled, scrabbling into a crouch, and discharged a blinding orange plume directly into the nearest man's face. He shrieked, rifle clattering to the ground as he clawed frantically at his eyes. I didn't linger. I bolted, plunging into the resisting undergrowth, branches lashing my face as I fled. Behind erupted shouts, the crashing sounds of pursuit. I knew these woods intimately, but they possessed numbers and lethal force. My sole chance lay in evasion, finding a pocket of silence long enough to call for rescue. I ran until my lungs burned like embers and my legs screamed protest, yet I dared not pause. Intermittently, a distant shout or the snap of a pursued branch spurred me onward, a chilling reminder they were still hunting. A plan began to crystallize amidst the panic. Reach elevation, find a signal. The closest station was leagues away, but the old fire tower crowning Serpent's Spine Ridge offered a possibility. The ascent was brutal, but it was my only beacon. Veering towards the ridge, the ground steepened, grew treacherous. Loose scree skittered underfoot. More than once I nearly tumbled. Fear, potent as adrenaline, propelled me upward. Halfway, gasping, I pressed myself flat against a massive boulder, straining to hear above my own ragged breath and hammering heart. For a few precious seconds, silence reigned. Then, carried on the breeze, a voice. "There, up on the ridge, I see her." Renewed terror lent wings to my feet. I scrambled up the rocky incline, stealth abandoned, focused only on the skeletal structure piercing the skyline. Cresting the ridge, the rusted metal frame of the fire tower loomed. I flew up the stairs, taking them in twos, fumbling for my phone, praying for connectivity. At the summit, breathless, trembling, I stared at the screen. One solitary bar flickered. It had to suffice. I stabbed at the dispatcher's number, eyes frantically scanning the tree line below. "This is Ranger Alara Vance," I gasped the moment the line connected. "Requesting immediate backup. Serpent's Spine Fire Tower. Armed hostiles in pursuit. Shots fired. Repeat, shots." A bullet whined, striking sparks from the metal railing inches away. I dropped instinctively, the phone tumbling from my grasp onto the grated floor. "Come on down now, Ranger." The leader's voice drifted up, laced with chilling confidence. Got nowhere left to go. He was right. Cornered. But the call, however fragmented, had gone through. Now it was merely a question of time. Whose clock would run out first? The subsequent hour stretched into an eternity. The poachers, wary of the exposed climb, settled below, content to wait me out. They knew, as I did, that descending meant stepping into their sights. As the sun dipped low, painting the heavens in strokes of violent orange and tender pink, the most exquisite sound I'd ever known reached my ears, the whump, whump, whump of helicopter blades. They heard it too. Their alarmed shouts were a symphony. What ensued was a controlled chaos. Preserve helicopters, state troopers, even a tactical unit converged, swarming the ridge. Outnumbered, outgunned, the poachers surrendered without further resistance. Helped down from the tower, limbs shaking but whole, I was awash in relief. Bone-deep exhaustion and a fierce surge of pride. I had stared into humanity's rapacious heart and endured. More, I had been instrumental in dismantling a blight that had plagued Whisperwind for months. In the following days, recounting the events, testifying, the memory of that day remained vivid. The swift, terrifying pivot from routine to survival, the fragile membrane between the civilized and the savage, so easily breached. I remain a ranger. The forest endures as my sanctuary, the place my soul breathes easiest. But now, traversing the trails, I carry the weight of knowing what shadows conceal. I move with greater caution, heightened awareness, and a profound gratitude for the quiet days, the patrols that end uneventfully, for I learned irrevocably that in the wild, everything can shatter in a heartbeat, and sometimes the apex predator walks upright. Bare weeks have I haunted this pile of timbers. Alara they call me, though I feel anonymous as the dust motes dancing in the gloom. Sleep a forgotten country I haven't visited in what feels like a solar year. The instant I breached the threshold, the air met me, thick and stagnant, a lungful of decades trapped indoors. Filaments of gray draped every surface. Floorboards groaned under the whisper of my tread. Isolation and economy dictated this choice, a refuge I'd thought from the world's clamor. Now the silence screams louder than any crowd. My first campaign was against the front room's accumulated grime. I ferried in my scant furnishings, positioned a solitary settee, coaxed a lamp into hesitant life. Then the ritual of the broom, a futile attempt to impose welcome upon the unwelcoming. Yet, shifting any derelict piece merely unveiled deeper strata of cobwebs, alluvial fans of dirt clinging to the corners. Exhaustion claimed me by day's end. Collapsed onto the settee, my gaze traced the cartography of peeling wallpaper as I bargained with myself. The house's other secrets could wait. Within days, the atmosphere thickened, curdled. Loneliness, I first reasoned, conjuring phantoms from the sheer vacancy. This residence sprawls, chambers mostly void or cluttered with the anonymous debris of predecessors. A cramped study adjacent, a kitchen perpetually exhaling the scent of wood rot, a dining hall dominated by a long, scarred table attended by mismatched chairs. Above, a trio of bedrooms slumbered. Below, the cellar festered. Ah, the cellar, the house's festering wound. Irrespective of the heavens' moods, its floor glistens with a perpetual seep. The walls weep condensation, an effluvium coiled upwards from that first night, mildew entwined with something unplaceable, vaguely emetic. I recall depositing cleaning agents near its door, resolving to plumb its depths for ruptured pipes come morning. No leak ever revealed itself. The walls remained merely clammy, the air ponderous. Perhaps, I mused, archaic drainage systems wept unseen. I flung windows open wide upstairs, praying for ventilation's grace. It offered scant relief. Concurrently, the nocturnal murmurs began, a susurrus as if a clandestine congregation gathered just beyond hearing's reach. Lying rigid in bed, contemplating the fractured plaster overhead, I'd perceive it, a low tide of whispers, indistinct, rising and falling, syncopated with my own frantic pulse. Wind, I insisted. Old timbers settling, but its nightly punctuality, always post-midnight, eroded such mundane explanations. After several such nights, resolve hardened. Armed with a torch, I would confront the subterranean dark, exorcise this auditory ghost with empirical proof of its absence. Slipping from bed, feet finding worn slippers, I eased open the cellar door. The stench struck with renewed force. The air felt denser still, a palpable pressure. My torch beam sliced the oppressive dark as I descended, each stair groaning its protest. My grip became a vice on the railing, anticipating unseen obstacles. Below, the light revealed drifts of dilapidated boxes, skeletal remains of chairs, an ancient couch slumped against the far wall, its fabric ravaged by time and neglect. I swept the beam methodically, probing every recess. The rhythmic drip, drip, drip echoed from some hidden corner, yet its source remained elusive. Behind boxes, I sought vents or conduits, potential channels for external sounds. Finding nothing, I stood sentinel in the chill for minutes, straining to hear past my own ragged breath and the inexorable drip. Silence reigned. Ascending, cold and coiled with tension, I felt a fragile victory. The whispers held their peace for the remainder of that night. Perhaps it was merely exhaustion, the psychic toll of displacement. That fragile truce lasted less than a day. The following night, the voices returned, imbued with a chilling proximity. Standing in the living room, I could almost feel their vibrations ascending through the floorboards beneath my feet. I sought refuge in the television's electronic babble, yet sensed the faint, insidious murmuring persisting beneath the dialogue. Disquiet drove me to the settee for sleep that night, abandoning the upper floor. Morning found me stiff-necked and resentful, angered by this surrender to phantasmal sounds. Determined to reclaim normalcy, I dedicated the day to the upper reaches, dusting forgotten shelves, scouring floors. Amidst the debris in one bedroom, I unearthed stacks of brittle newspapers. Their headlines faded beyond my weary inclination to decipher. Throughout this labor, an unnerving prickle persisted, the sensation of being observed. I'd whirl around, expecting an intruder framed in the doorway, only to find vacant air. As twilight bled through the dusty panes, hunger asserted itself. In the kitchen, assembling a meager meal, I focused on the mundane, washing dishes, drying them, my gaze snagging repeatedly on the cellar door. Dread coiled within me, anticipating the nightly resurgence of whispers, like waiting for an inevitable, invisible storm. That evening, the voices transgressed their subterranean confines. I could have sworn they emanated from the hallway, near the staircase ascending to the second floor. A knot tightened in my stomach, my hands trembled. Drawn towards the sound, heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs, breath catching in my throat, I advanced. As I neared, absolute silence fell. The hallway stood empty, save for the distant, monotonous hum of the kitchen refrigerator. I remained frozen, feeling the pulse throb in my temples. Turning back towards the living room's relative sanctuary, a flicker at the edge of vision, a shadow detaching itself from the wall, fluid and swift. I stopped dead, gone the instant I tried to fix it with my gaze, yet gooseflesh pebbled my arms. Imagination, surely. Rubbing my eyes, I declared the day, and my nerves utterly spent. Ascending to my bedroom, I attempted to secure the door, only to discover the frame subtly warped. It wouldn't latch completely, leaving a narrow, vertical slit of profound darkness. Unease slithered through me, but fatigue won out. I surrendered to a fitful attempt at sleep. Around 3 in the morning, I snapped awake. The whispers were back, no longer distant, but seemingly pressed against the very wood of my bedroom door. My body went rigid, every nerve straining to decipher the low, ceaseless confluence of voices overlapping, merging into an unintelligible drone. My limbs felt leaden, a glacial chill traced my spine. Motionless, I endured. The sound persisted for a minute, perhaps 2, then gradually attenuated, when courage finally returned, enough to peer into the hallway. Nothing greeted me but empty, shadowed space. Days later, the cellar's miasma, now richer, more potent, compelled another descent. This time, a more powerful torch and a broom accompanied me, intent on a thorough reconnaissance. I nudged aside boxes previously ignored, uncovering within them tarnished picture frames, rust-eaten tools, fragments of indeterminate clothing, none offering explanation for the voices or the weeping walls. Deep within the subterranean gloom, a noise erupted behind me, making me start violently, a soft, dry scraping. I spun, torch beam flailing wildly, illuminating only the familiar tableau, the decrepit couch, looming shelves, broken chairs. My skin prickled with a primal urge to flee, yet I forced myself onward, a forensic investigator of my own fear, every corner scrutinized. I even wrestled the heavy couch aside, revealing only more elaborate cobwebs and hairline fractures in the foundation. Enough. Scrambling back towards the stairs, hands shaking so violently the torch nearly slipped from my grasp, I bolted upwards. The cellar door slammed shut behind me. The lock clicked with futile finality. I leaned against the wood, gasping, sweat cooling unpleasantly on my skin, the frantic pulse hammering in my throat. Returning to the living room, I registered a shift. The air possessed a newfound chill. A subtle draft, source untraceable, snaked through the room. That night, attempting distraction via a late-night program, the lights flickered violently. A jolt shot through my chest. I rose, poised to investigate the circuit breaker, but they steadied. And then I felt it, an absolute certainty of presence directly behind me. Intimate as breath, profoundly alien. The fine hairs on my arms lifted. My mouth turned to dust, whirling around, emptiness. Only the frantic cadence of my own heart filled the void. Retreating to the kitchen, I gripped the counter's edge, dragging air into constricted lungs. Logic offered no purchase, yet the conviction of being watched, of sharing this space, remained unshakable. The subsequent day became a blur of determined activity, replacing bulbs, hauling a shattered chair to the exterior refuse pile, flinging every possible window open to the indifferent breeze. Music blared from my phone, a desperate bulwark against the silence. Yet, intermittently, peripheral vision betrayed me. fleeting transits of movement dissolving upon direct observation. Each occurrence left my palms slick with sweat, my breath quickening. "Just jumpy," I repeated, wiping my hands compulsively on my jeans. Evening necessitated another confrontation with the cellar. I needed to ascertain if the dampness was pooling. Opening the door released not just the smell, but the faint, insidious music of those voices. Holding my breath, I listened. There it was, subliminal, a constant churning murmur just beneath conscious hearing. My legs felt unreliable, watery, but I descended. The torch flickered erratically. I rapped it sharply against my palm. The stench was overwhelming now, damp earth commingled with something acrid, sour. I navigated the debris, trying to pinpoint the locus of the sound. The further I ventured, the more pronounced the subtle vibration became through the soles of my shoes, as if the house itself possessed a low, resonant hum. My light played over the weeping walls, seeking fissures, openings, anything to explain the intrusion. Nothing beyond the pervasive damp. Crouching, I pressed my ear to the cold concrete. A faint tremor, perhaps real, perhaps imagined. Suddenly, a sharp clatter from behind. Metal striking concrete. I leaped upright, spinning, heart seizing. A rusted screwdriver lay on the floor, evidently dislodged from a precarious perch on a shelf. Panic surged, raw and overwhelming. I had to escape. I scrambled towards the stairs, misjudged the bottom step, and slammed my knee against the riser's edge with a choked cry of pain. Ignoring the throb, I clawed my way up, flung the door shut, twisted the lock. Upstairs, I limped to the settee, massaging my bruised knee. The physical pain was a dull counterpoint to the panic still vibrating through my chest. Reality felt thin, fraying at the edges. The urge to call someone, anyone, was potent, but connections in this new town were non-existent. I sat, kneading my temples, forcing slow breaths, battling the rising tide of unreason. Later, drifting in the living room's gloom, I saw it, not a flicker this time, but a definite shape, darker than the shadows gliding across the far wall. Swift, fluid, like spilled ink, yet utterly inexplicable. I sprang to my feet, heart slamming against my ribs like a trapped bird. My trembling hands aimed the torch into every corner. Nothing. The ensuing silence felt immense, charged, ringing in my ears. Sleep was a distant shore I couldn't reach. Morning arrived, pale and indifferent. A decision formed: escape to town, immerse myself in normalcy, however briefly. I drove aimlessly, procured groceries I barely needed, lingered in a cafe, absorbing the ambient chatter of strangers, a temporary balm. Eventually, inevitably, I returned, steeling myself. Unlocking the door released the same familiar, lifeless air. Groceries deposited on the kitchen counter, my eyes studiously avoided the cellar door. Ignore it, I commanded myself. Focus, organize, a futile strategy. As dusk descended, the familiar tension returned, knotting the muscles in my back, compelling constant nervous glances over my shoulder. The television provided hollow company. The house felt electric, waiting. Midnight. TV silenced. The ascent to bed began. Halfway up the stairs, a distinct scuttling emanated from within the walls, too substantial for mice. I froze, listening intently. Then a whisper, terrifyingly intimate, breathed directly beside my ear. My heart felt like it imploded. I spun, phone's flashlight beam cutting the air. Vacancy, yet a palpable wave of cold air washed over me. I didn't walk, I fled, bolting into my bedroom, slamming the door, the useless, warped door. Sleep remained elusive. After what felt like an eternity suspended in darkness, I heard them. Floorboards creaking in the hall outside my room. Slow, measured, deliberate footsteps, breath held captive in my chest. I stared at the door, at the dark slit beneath it, waiting for a shadow, a sign. Nothing visible, yet the pacing continued back and forth, a slow, relentless patrol. How long it lasted, I cannot say. Oblivion must have claimed me eventually, for I awoke abruptly to daylight assaulting the window. My body was a single, taut ache. My head throbbed with residual fear. Rubbing my eyes, I tried to dispel the night's lingering dread. One final inspection of the cellar, I vowed. If no rational explanation presented itself, then flight was the only answer. Some tangible proof, that's all I required. Which brings me to this moment. For the past hour, I, Ilara, have paced this living room, a caged animal seeking the courage to unlatch its own prison. Faint thuds echo intermittently from below. The persistent sensation of a presence at my back raises the hairs on my neck, parches my mouth. Is it tangible, this haunting, or am I fracturing from within? Regardless, this existence is untenable. I am poised now for one last descent. A superior torch this time, perhaps the phone's camera for documentation. Find an explanation, find peace, find nothing, find freedom elsewhere. This relentless pursuit by whispers and shadows, this creeping infiltration of my sanity must end. Even if it's imagined, the terror is corporeal, and if not, the implications are far graver. Either path leads away from sleepless nights. I am opening the door, now. Whether I return calmer or simply confirm the abyss, I cannot say, but I must confront it. I cannot spend another night cowering from creaking boards and whispering walls. Whatever resides below, whatever breathes its damp secrets into the fabric of this house, I will not remain its captive. It is time to face the source, even if it's merely more weeping concrete and broken remnants of lives past. Certainty, even terrifying certainty, is preferable to this gnawing ambiguity. So downwards I go. If the voices rise to meet me this time, I will be listening. I am descending now. I only hope that upon my return, the feeling of unseen breath upon my neck will finally be gone.